came home early and heard my parents talking with my aunt at the table. My mom said, "Emma's if she moved out, I'd finally have peace." My dad laughed and said, "She'll never do it. She's too needy." Then I walked back out the door. 3 months later, they finally noticed I was gone. The moment my dad laughed about me, something in my chest went completely quiet. I had just opened the front door. I remember the smell of my mom's pot roast, the sound of silverware clinking, and my Aunt Carol's voice drifting from the kitchen. I was about to call out that I was home when I heard my mom say my name. "She's just extra. If she moved out, I'd finally have peace." There was a pause, like they were all picturing it. Then my dad laughed. "She'll never do it. She's too needy." My aunt said something about how some kids just cling forever. I stood there in the hallway, keys still in my hand. I had come home early to surprise them. I'd picked up cupcakes on the way because my mom had mentioned she had a long week. I had even taken a half day off work to help my dad organize paperwork for his insurance. Needy. Peace. I stepped back outside before the floor could creak. I closed the door as softly as I could and walked to my car. I sat there staring at the house, the same house I helped pay for when my dad was out of work for 8 months. The same house I'd turned down a promotion for because it would have required moving states. They wanted peace. That night I came home at my usual time. I acted normal. My mom asked why I looked tired. My dad reminded me to transfer money for the water bill. No one mentioned what they had said. That was the part that hurt the most. It was casual for them. I did not cry. I did not confront them. I just started planning. Over the next week, I quietly gathered my documents, birth certificate, passport, tax records. I opened a new bank account at a different branch. I redirected my paycheck. I stopped automatically covering groceries. When my mom asked why the pantry seemed lighter, I told her prices went up. They complained about inflation. I stopped driving my dad to physical therapy. I told him my schedule changed. He had to start using a ride service. He grumbled about the cost. They did not connect it to me pulling away.
2 weeks later, I toured a small studio apartment on the other side of town. The building was old but clean. The landlord, Marcus, said previous tenants usually stayed a long time because it was quiet. Quiet sounded perfect. I signed the lease that same afternoon. The move itself took less than 3 hours. I did it on a Tuesday while they were both at work. I rented a small van, packed only what I bought with my own money, and left everything else exactly where it was. I left my key on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation. If I was extra, I would remove the extra. The first month in the studio felt strange. No one asking where I was going, no one commenting on what I ate, no one calling me dramatic for wanting privacy. They did not call the first week. I assumed they thought I was staying with a friend. The second week, my mom texted, "Are you coming home tonight?" I did not respond. The third week, my dad called once. I watched it ring until it stopped. By the end of the first month, there were 5 missed calls and 2 short messages asking if I was mad about something. 3 months later, I got a voicemail that changed everything. It wasn't my mom, it was my Aunt Carol. She sounded confused. "Emma, your parents just realized your room is empty. They thought you were working late all this time. Your dad tried to transfer money from your account for the mortgage, and it would not go through. What is going on?" I replayed that voicemail 5 times. They did not notice I was gone. They noticed the money was gone. That was the moment I understood something I had been too blind to see before. I was not their daughter, I was their backup plan. I did not call my aunt back. Instead, I let the voicemail sit there while I went to work like nothing had happened. I answered emails. I sat through a meeting about quarterly projections. On the outside, I was stable. On the inside, something was rearranging itself. That night, my phone started blowing up. First, my mom, "I'm worried about you." Then my dad, "Why isn't your account linked anymore? Are you safe?" "No, are you okay? Just logistics." I turned my phone face down and made pasta in my tiny kitchen. The studio was so small I could reach the sink from the stove without taking a full step. I remember thinking how ridiculous it was that this little room felt bigger than the house I grew up in.
The next morning, there were 12 missed calls. Around noon, my manager, David, walked over to my desk and said, "There are 2 people here asking for you." My stomach dropped. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I saw them, my parents sitting stiffly next to each other. My mom's purse was on her lap, and my dad was staring at his phone. They had never come to my office before, not once in 2 years. I walked in and closed the door behind me. My mom stood up immediately. "Why would you do this? Do you know how scared we were?" I asked, "Scared of what?" She blinked like the question confused her. My dad cut in, "You disconnected the joint account. The mortgage bounced." There it was again, the money. I looked at both of them and said, "I moved out." My mom laughed like I had made a joke. "No, you didn't." I said, "I did." Silence. My dad's face shifted, and he asked why I didn't tell them. I said, "Because I heard you." Instead, I asked, "Would it have changed anything?" My mom crossed her arms. "This is dramatic, Emma. Families don't just disappear." I let that sit in the air for a second. Then I said, "You told Aunt Carol you'd finally have peace if I moved out." My mom went still. My dad's eyes flicked toward her. "You were listening?" she asked. "I came home early." My dad shook his head. "That was taken out of context." I asked, "What was the context?" No one answered. My manager knocked lightly on the door, probably making sure things were not escalating. I told my parents I had to get back to work. My mom grabbed my arm before I left. "You can't just abandon us. We rely on you." That sentence almost made me laugh. Rely on me. For the first time in my life, I realized how backward everything had been. I was the youngest in the family, but I was the one covering half the bills, the one scheduling appointments, the one fixing problems. And now their system had cracked. I told them I was not coming back. My dad's voice hardened. "If you think you can survive on your own, go ahead, but don't expect us to bail you out when this falls apart." I said nothing. They left angry. That night, I finally listened to the rest of the voicemail from Aunt Carol. There was something at the end I had missed the first time. She said, "Call me back. There's something you need to know about the house." That part stuck with me, because as far as I knew, the house was fine, and my parents were not the type to share problems unless they absolutely had to. I waited 2 days before calling her back. Not because I was scared, I just wanted to see what my parents would do first. They tried everything except apologizing. My mom sent long texts about how hurt she was. My dad sent short ones about responsibility. At one point he wrote, "You can't just walk away from family obligations." I almost replied, "Watch me." Instead, I called my aunt on Sunday afternoon. She picked up immediately. "Emma, thank God, what is going on?" I told her I moved out, and I told her I heard the conversation. She was quiet for a second, then said, "I didn't think you were home." "I know." She sighed. "Your mom didn't mean it the way it sounded." I said it sounded clear. Another pause, then she lowered her voice. "You need to know something about the house. Your dad added you to the mortgage last year when his credit dropped. You signed some papers, remember? He said it was for refinancing.
I remembered. I had signed because he told me it would lower their monthly payment. I never looked closely. I trusted him. And Carol continued, "If payments stop, it affects you, your credit, everything." That explained the panic. I ended the call and just sat there on my couch, staring at the wall, my tiny, peaceful wall. I pulled up my email and searched for the documents from last year. I found them. There it was in plain language, co-borrower. I was not just helping, I was legally tied to their house. That night my dad called again. I answered this time. "Why didn't you tell me I was on the mortgage?" He was silent for a second too long. "It was temporary. That's not what the paperwork says. You're overreacting. It was the easiest way to secure approval. I used my credit. We're family." There it was again, the word that excused everything. I asked, "If I'm family, why am I extra?" He inhaled sharply. That conversation was private. It became mine when I heard it. Then he said something that shifted everything. "If you don't help with the payments, we lose the house." The way he said it was not emotional. It was practical, like I was a utility bill. I hung up without responding. That night I could not sleep, not because I felt guilty, but because I felt trapped. The next morning I requested a full copy of the mortgage agreement from the bank. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was the bank, and the woman on the line said something that made my hands go cold. "Miss Parker, we've been trying to reach the primary account holder for weeks. The loan is already 2 payments behind." 2 payments, which meant they were behind before I left. They had not been relying on me, they had been sinking, and I had just stepped out of the boat. That was the moment I realized this was bigger than hurt feelings. They were hiding something, and whatever it was, they had tied me to it. I asked the bank representative, "How far behind are they really?" She paused while she pulled up the file. Quote, "3 months total delinquency. If the next payment is missed, foreclosure review begins."
3 months. I had only been gone for 3 months, which meant they stopped paying right when I left. I thanked her and hung up. For the first time since moving out, I drove back to the house, not to go inside, just to look at it from the outside. Everything seemed normal. The lawn was cut, the porch light worked, my mum's car was in the driveway. Nothing about it said financial disaster. I stayed parked across the street for almost an hour before my dad came outside. He looked thinner, more tired. He stood on the porch talking on the phone, pacing. I could not hear the conversation, but I saw the way he ran his hand over his head and looked down at the ground. That was new. Growing up, my dad always had the answers. That night, my mum called again. This time, she did not start with accusations. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the house." I told her I knew about the mortgage and the delinquency. There was silence on the other end. Then she said, "Your father had some business losses last year." It was vague. "How much?" "A lot." "Why didn't you tell me?" "We didn't want to stress you." I almost laughed. "You put me on the mortgage without explaining it." "It was supposed to be temporary." She sounded smaller than usual. "If we lose the house, we have nowhere to go." That sentence should have broken me. Instead, I asked something I never would have asked before. "Why didn't you sell it when things started going bad?" Another pause. "Because your father thought he could fix it." "Fix what?" She did not answer directly. Then she said something that made everything snap into focus. "He invested in something he shouldn't have." I felt it before she said the word. Crypto. The same year he added me to the mortgage, and the same year he told me refinancing would save us. He had not been stabilizing the house, he had been gambling with it, and when it collapsed, he quietly tied me to the fallout. I told my mum I would come over the next day. When I walked into the kitchen, the same kitchen where I heard them call me extra, it felt smaller.
My dad was sitting at the table with a stack of unopened envelopes. He did not smile. He just said, "We need your help." Not "I'm sorry" or "I messed up." For the first time, I looked at him and realized something I had never allowed myself to think before. They didn't regret what they said. They regretted losing control. And the worst part was, they still believed I would step back into the role they built for me. They were wrong.
I sat down across from my dad. The envelopes were from the bank, the utility company, and a law firm. I did not open them. I did not need to. My dad slid a paper toward me. It was a payment plan proposal. If you cover the next 2 months, we can catch up. I'll figure out the rest. How? I have some leads. It was the same language he used last year. Leads, opportunities, temporary setbacks. My mum stood near the sink, quiet for once. I looked at him and said, "How much did you lose?" He hesitated. "How much, Dad?" When he finally said the number, it was almost the exact amount of my college savings that had supposedly been used years ago for medical bills. "You used my college fund for this?" No one answered. My mum's eyes filled, but she still did not speak. "It wasn't supposed to go that way," my dad said. "It doubled at first. I was going to put everything back. You wouldn't have even known." "But I did know. You put the house at risk. You put me on the mortgage, and you called me needy." That last part came out steady, not emotional, just factual. My dad leaned back in his chair like I had insulted him. "That was a private conversation. You were relieved at the idea of me leaving." He rubbed his face. Things were stressful. So I became the problem. No one denied it. My mum finally spoke. "We were scared of failing." The word hung there. I realized something uncomfortable. They were not villains in their own story. They were people who made reckless decisions and then looked for something smaller than them to blame. Me. If I had stayed, I would have kept paying, I would have covered the gaps, and I would have postponed the collapse long enough for them to pretend everything was fine. But I left, and everything cracked. My dad pushed the paper closer to me again. "Just 2 months, that's all we need." I looked at the house around me, the walls I painted, the dent in the cabinet. Suddenly it all felt like a set piece. I stood up. "I'm not paying." My mum's voice broke. "Emma, please." "I'm removing myself from the mortgage." "You can't just do that," my dad said. "Watch me." I walked out of the house without slamming the door. No drama, no yelling, just a decision. Over the next few weeks, I spoke to a lawyer. I learned more about financial liability than I ever wanted to. Because I had signed under misleading circumstances, and because I was not listed as an owner on the deed, there were options. Not easy ones, but options. The foreclosure process moved faster than my parents expected. The bank did not care about pride or family, or who was extra. 3 months later, a notice was posted on the front door. My mum called me that night. She was crying. "We have to leave." For the first time, I heard real regret. Not about the house, but about me. "We should have never treated you like that." It came too late, because by then I had already signed a new lease in a different city. I did not tell them I was leaving the city at first. While they were packing 20 years of furniture into boxes, I was packing my studio into 2 suitcases. A new job offer had come out of nowhere. A former co-worker recommended me for a position 3 hours away. Better pay, a clean break. I signed the lease the same day my parents got their final eviction notice. Timing is strange like that. The last time I went to the house, it barely looked like ours. The living room echoed, and the walls were marked where frames used to hang.
My dad was taking apart the dining table, the same table where they called me extra. My mum hugged me the second I walked in. We were wrong. I did not respond. Your father thought he was protecting us. I thought keeping things quiet would keep you from worrying. We kept telling ourselves you were strong enough to handle more. I said I was your daughter, not your backup plan. My dad stopped what he was doing. He looked older than I had ever seen him, not just tired, but smaller. I messed up. That was the first time he said it without an excuse. I should have never put you on that loan or touched your college money, and I should have never let you think you were a burden. The words were clear, direct, and no longer defensive. 3 months ago, that apology would have changed everything. Now it just felt like proof that I had been right to leave. Where will you go? I asked. Your aunt has a spare room, my mum said. For now. The house that had defined our entire family was already someone else's problem. There was a real estate sign staked into the lawn. My dad walked me to my car. Are you coming back to visit? I thought about it. I don't know. He nodded. You deserved better from us. That sentence followed me all the way to the highway. I started my new job the following Monday. New apartment, new routines. No one asking where my paycheck was going. No one calling me dramatic for wanting space. A month later, my mum sent me a photo. They were in my aunt's backyard, folding chairs, paper plates, and my dad grilling. She wrote, "We're figuring things out. We're in counseling." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I'm glad." They did regret it. I could hear it in every call now, in the way they asked about my job instead of my bank account, and in the way my dad said, "I'm proud of you," without following it with a request. But regret does not rewind things. The version of me who would have stayed, paid everything, and swallowed the comments is gone. They wanted peace, so I gave it to them. And for the first time in my life, I kept some for myself too.